Hi, Landscape Indicator Revision Team. We've got a lot of stuff to cover on our 1-hour call coming up soon. And so what I decided to do is go ahead and just pre-record the introductory information about the indicators and this particular system. That way you can take a look at this whenever it's most convenient for you, and then we can spend a little more of the call talking about some of the details. So where does this revision fit into the bigger picture? So this is all part of the mission of your cooperative to create this shared blueprint for conservation actions for natural and cultural resources. And it's really part of that first step of having some shared metrics of success, our indicators and targets. What are we really shooting for, and how do we collectively measure success in that? Some reminders here about some of the background. I know a lot of you have been involved in this process. So there are three broad types of resources. So we talk about the natural resources, the cultural resources, and the socioeconomic resources in the cooperative. So the natural is really focused on, at this point, the integrity of ecological systems, with a caveat that we may, if this doesn't work, eventually need to start thinking about the viability of key species in addition to that. The cultural resource side, so this is really about sort of how humans interacting with the landscape, particularly sort of around history and culturally important resources. And the socioeconomic resources, so your economy, your food, fiber, fuel, those kind of pieces. So the cooperative has decided to really focus on the natural and the cultural, using as far as determining measures of success, and leave the socioeconomic more as a way to sort of sell the vision for the natural and the cultural side. And so within the landscapes ecosystem, which is what we're going to be talking about, that we have both indicators for the natural resources and also one for the cultural resources as well. So all these indicators are mapped around these different ecosystem types. So from marine, estuarine, all the way into some aggregates, landscapes, which you'll obviously know a little bit about, which focuses on connections across all the terrestrial systems, and waterscapes, which is the water equivalent, going from the fresh water all the way out into the ocean. And so both the cultural and the natural resources are mapped within each of these particular ecosystems. So some of the review that's happened for the current indicators, there's a whole lot input by a whole mess of people with expertise across these different ecosystems, including folks from all 5 adjacent LCCs. So a lot of work and thinking went into originally picking these indicators, but also it was the understanding that, hey, we weren't going to get it perfect the first time. And so set some criteria in which to test them, and then eventually come back and refine them if needed. Progress on indicator testing so far. So there are 3 different types of criteria that were used to select the indicators. So there was the practical criteria. Can we actually monitor and model these indicators with current resources and programs? Ecological criteria, how well these indicators actually indicating other components of the ecosystem and responding to big landscape scale threats. And then the third was the social criteria. So how will they resonate with the American public? How will they resonate with public land and water managers, private land and water managers? Can we connect them to economic values? So those are the 3 the types of indicators, and so we're basically underway in testing at least some of them in all of these different categories. So for the practical criteria, your staff here at the cooperative has been either creating GIS layers or using existing GIS layers to try to basically model these indicators. So we thought we could take monitoring information, take the current data, and put it together and cover the entire geography. So that's what we've been doing. On the ecological criteria side, there are 3 different teams that have been testing the terrestrial, freshwater, and the marine. And so for the purposes of the landscapes, so Ricky White from NatureServe and Ashton Drew from NC State have been tag teaming on the testing all the terrestrial indicators, which includes landscapes. And also a nice happy surprise a while back ago. We weren't originally planning to formally test some of the social criteria for another year or two in the actual testing and revision process. But one of the team's survey design classes from Randy Kramer at Duke, one of the graduate level design classes, decided we had a team of folks take on this question about how well some of these different types of indicators might resonate with the American public. So they took on that project, and so we have some results from that as well. First off, the practical criteria, the landscapes. So I'm presenting you the broader overview of sort of some of these results, and I'll show you at the end. You've all sort of seen that landscapes overview thing that I sent out, so I'll remind you where that is again, and that'll provide some more details about all the things I'm going to talk about. But at the simple overview, so here are the 5 landscape indicators and how well they did on the practical criteria. So structural connectivity, so this isn't from the view of any particular species, but just overall structural patterns of how things are connected. So that one passed. We have a data set for you to take a look at, the EPA National Environmental Framework, or National Ecological Framework. So that one fairly simply, we found a potential one to use, so that passed. Those exist out there. Functional connectivity, so this is from the view of particular species. The project we were hoping to use didn't have the final sort of detailed results ready in time for this particular deadline. So right now, chalk it up as sort of failed for now. And you'll see in these recommendations, and these are some of the things we'll be discussing. So the staff recommendation for that one was to pull the functional connectivity indicator out for now and revisit in a year or so. Acres of interior natural habitat, we put up a couple options for discussion in the particular document. One, modeling it as described, and another one, a potential other option for getting at something similar, but may work a little better. So we put up a couple options for the team to discuss. Acres of biodiversity hotspots in natural conditions. So we have a small change suggested in that one related to making these sort of climate resilient biodiversity hotspots instead of just biodiversity hotspots in general, and using some of the TNC resilience work. So more details on that in the larger document. And again, all of these have links to the GIS data on the planning atlas, so you can take a look at some of these different options. And the last one on the practical criteria, historic register sites without nearby development. So that one was fairly easy to put together. We've got a layer. It doesn't actually show the ones without nearby development. We do have some other layers of that, but it shows you where these historic register sites are. So that one passed as well. Next on to the ecological criteria. So this is that question about our indicators, how well are they representing other species and ecological features? So we've been testing at least on the terrestrial side, we've been pulling out indicators that didn't quite make it as selected as indicators. So we sort of end up calling those second tier indicators, ones that came through the process, but didn't make it for various reasons. Maybe their range was too small. Maybe there were issues with the monitoring. Maybe we couldn't model them as well as we thought. And also, probably a lot of you recall, we asked the larger web community for other suggestions for other ecological features or species or, abiotic endpoints that you'd like to be tested in that process. So we've been working through those and how you prioritize them over the web. One note for pretty much all these systems is that, a lot of the sampling is opportunistic. So in a lot of the cases when we've had species or even certain measures, we may have known locations, but we can't say much about where they aren't. So we've had to do some sort of interesting little methods to try to work with that piece. And overall, for all of these, the testing is going to be completed within a year, and we're basically finishing the testing, working on lining up the testing to be finished in time for the discussion of each ecosystem. So we're a little bit slower on this landscapes. We hope to be a little bit faster on the next few ecosystems now that we've sort of got our system down. All right, so what are we looking at? So for the testing the ecological criteria, we're looking for overlap. And things like, do high indicator values correspond with high values of other ecosystem attributes? So what you'll see, and I'll send out separately the report that has all the sort of methodology details and specific graphs for all the different things we tested for landscapes. But this is the general sort of pattern we're looking at. So if you look, we've got sort of 3 graphs here, and up at the top, we've got your example of something that's corresponding. So you see you can see this sort of red line. And so what this is on your x-axis, we have, this sort of simple example of percentage of the pixels in that category. So like if we take an example of, say we did the sort of structural connectivity, on the y-axis, it would be your sort of measure of structural connectivity. On the x-axis, it would be what you're testing it against. So is it low or is it high? And so if they correspond, you'd expect this line going up. The more you get on one side, the more you get on the other. The next one down, this no relationship, in that case, it's sort of, well, low and high, they're pretty much about the same thing. It's a solid line across. And then if you have something that's more complementary or contradictory, that's capturing something totally different in the system, you might expect the reverse direction of this line, where really high values of an indicator actually maybe correspond to lower values of something else. So this is the reverse pattern we're sort of looking for. Here's an example with structural connectivity. Oops, actually it looked like some things figures got cut off here, so I'll explain. So this top bar here that you're looking at in the top left, so this is looking at acres of exotic species versus structural connectivity. And so here, there's really not much of a relationship at all between structural connectivity and, in this case, acres of exotic species. And something to note, this scale is a little bit, it's kind of reversed as you normally expect, because more exotic species is bad. So here's your highest acreage of exotic species is on the left, and then it goes to less and less exotics. So, structural connectivity doesn't really tell you much about the exotic species. This other one, this is the relationship between the plant community coefficient of conservatism and structural connectivity. And so in this case, we have a pretty nice relationship between these two. And so what that means is that, higher values for structural connectivity are sort of higher percentage of those pixels is also corresponding with higher levels of the coefficient of conservatism in the plant community. So coefficient of conservatism, if you're not familiar with that, that's really looking at, how much of the plant community is made up of species that you'd expect to find only in unaltered pre-settlement states. So how conservative are these plant communities? How sensitive are they to human disturbance? So this one, in that case, you see you've got a pretty good relationship between that plant community sensitivity and structural connectivity. We got another example with the rarity weighted richness. So in this case, this is just looking at rare and locally range restricted species, and the richness of them comes from nature served layer, and not much of a relationship. And then landscape condition, this is actually another metric that combines a number of different GIS measures of landscape alteration. And so there's a pretty strong correlate connection here in overlap. So there's more details in the document I sent out, and actually in the main landscape document, about what these measures are, the gory details about how they're calculated. These top two, the exotic species and the coefficient of conservatism, these come from point level field sampling across all of North and Carolina through the Carolina Vegetation Survey. So we're trying as much as possible to have some measures that also include actual sort of field level point samples. So that's just an example of what some of those results look like. Okay, so the last piece was this social criteria question, and I mentioned that project that the Duke graduate students did. And so here's actually a distribution of the, where the different folks that they interviewed lived. So these were actually in-person encounter surveys. They tried to stratify across socioeconomic spectrum, so they weren't just getting rich people, weren't just getting poor people, but getting a good spread. And as you can see from the cluster, they did work around the triangle and also near the coast as well. So it's about 130 some odd people, I think, from that effort. And so we don't have examples specifically targeted towards the landscapes. We didn't ask any questions about the landscape indicator specifically, but I'll show you an example of one related to the beaches and dunes. So in this case, this was about 110 people. This was looking at willingness to donate money. And so we asked this question of, okay, sea turtles versus beach dune habitat. Of course, neither. And so now you can sort of see the distribution of, which one people were more willing to pay for, at least self-reportedly. And also looked at some larger environmental issues to see what people really cared about. So this was out of 100 people that answered this question about, what they cared most about. And so you can see, water pollution, air quality were up at the top. And you can see also endangered species, beach coastal conservation, and that distribution of what's at least around this sample area of coastal and central North Carolina. So a start at looking at some of these social criteria. Not going to resolve everything, but a good start. All right, so that's a quick overview of some of the testing. Now on to revising the indicators. So here's the monthly schedule. Y'all probably seen this on the web page already. So here are the different ecosystems that we're going to tackle each month. Landscapes is the one we're doing this month. This is the revision cycle that we're going to try to do every month for every system. Week 1, forming the teams, sending out potential revisions for discussion, getting indicator models up on the planning atlas. So y'all should have seen those pieces. Week 3, sending out some of the ecological criteria testing results and trying to schedule some team calls. And we're trying either week 3 or 4. In this case, it was 4, but we'll see as we go forward. And then after that, any additional discussions, and then final decisions by the team, wrapping up at the end of the month. So please, take a look at, as you're reading this, read up on materials, get ready for some good discussions on the call that we can focus specifically on trying to come to decisions on what we may or may not change, revise, or use in this ecosystem by the end of the month. Okay, so that is the quick overview. I just wanted to point out one more time. I'm going to show you, if you haven't already gone and seen some of the details. So here we are on the South Atlantic LCC website. You go down to indicators. You can go down to help improve indicators. And so this is under the landscapes tab, there's the read the details on landscape indicator revisions. So the link in the document I originally sent out, that link is actually sort of a live updated version. So you'll see it was actually last updated on the 19th. So we've added, since you've probably looked at it, some additional information on things like the ecological criteria. So here's the details I promised about what attributes were tested in the ecological criteria: rarity weighted richness, exotic invasives, and little information on the practical and the ecological criteria results. So be sure to take a look over this, take a look at some of the GIS layers if you want to review those as well to see what these look like geospatially. And so that's about it. So looking forward to the call, and looking forward to talking with you soon.